This video is part of a two-part series where I discuss the pros and the cons of retiring to the state of Arizona. In part one of the series, I discussed the pros of retiring to Arizona, and in part two, I'm going to discuss the cons of retiring to Arizona. So if you're interested in learning more, stay tuned. Hey there, my name is Chichi Aguoji and I'm a New York-based realtor with a focus on helping seniors and retirees sell their homes and find the best locations to retire. Hopefully, if you're joining me in this video, you've already watched part one of the series where I discuss the benefits of retiring to the state of Arizona. However, in this video, I'm going to be discussing some of the downsides that you should consider before you retire to the state of Arizona. Now, the first con that I'll discuss is that Arizona does not recognize daylight savings time. Now you might be thinking to yourself, if I don't have to fall back or spring forward, why would this be a con? Well, if you're retiring to Arizona, I think it's a con because for 8 months out of the calendar year, Arizona actually falls under or follows Pacific Standard Time. And then for 4 months out of the year, Arizona follows Mountain Standard Time. So if you have friends or family who are out of state that are trying to keep in touch with you or trying to communicate with you, it can get really confusing sometimes keeping track of which time zone you're in at any given point throughout the year. I will add that there is a section in Northeast Arizona that does abide by daylight savings time, and they're Navajo Nation. However, there's a subsection within Navajo Nation, the Hopi Reservation, that does not abide by daylight savings time. Confused? Yeah, I am too. Con number two. Water restrictions. So if you're someone who lives on the East Coast or you spend a majority of your time on the East Coast, you may not be aware that there are some states on the West Coast or in southwest of the US who are undergoing a water crisis at this time. And this is predominantly due to the Colorado River. And you can just take a look at these headlines to get an idea of what's going on. See, the Colorado River is one of Arizona's main sources of water, but after going through a period of a 20-year drought, the Colorado River is running dry. In fact, things have gotten so bad that the federal government has begun to ration the water that's being drawn from the Colorado River from the 7 states that do so, one of which is Arizona. Just take a look at these satellite images from NASA, and you can see that the white rings that you're seeing is really the vertical depth of water that has been lost over the years due to the drying up of the Colorado River. So as I mentioned, there are water restrictions that have been implemented as a result of the Colorado River drying out. And what you can rest assured about though is that these water restrictions may not affect homeowners as much. They're really more so placed into effect to keep farmers from overutilizing water to feed their crops. But you can be sure that as the river continues to dry out, with no one being able to create a natural resource like water, these restrictions might, in the future or in the long term, trickle out and affect homeowners as well. Now, the third con associated with retiring to Arizona is the lack of cultural diversity in the state. Now, this is really a relative con, and it's relative to New York, which is where I'm based and where I'm imagining that you might be based. So if you're someone who lives in New York and you're coming out of New York and moving into a state like Arizona for retirement, you can walk down the street in New York and you can hear as many as 5 different languages as you're walking down the street. So you might consider Arizona to be somewhat of a downgrade relative to New York when it comes to cultural diversity. And this is really because of the data. So according to the US Census, the 2020 census that was just taken, Arizona's population, the demographic within Arizona, is 84% Hispanics as well as non-Hispanic white. So those two groups make up more than the majority of people that live in Arizona. Arizona also has a sizable Native American population. In fact, it's the state that has the most number of Native American reservations in the US. And about 10% of the US's Native American population resides in Arizona. So just keep that in mind. Typically the more culturally diverse a location is, the more options you have, especially when it comes to food and cuisine. With Arizona's limited cultural diversity, you can also expect it to have limited options when it comes to its cuisine. So you can expect a large Mexican influence in Arizona's food and food options, and we've seen that with the Sonoran dog or the Tijuana dog. But outside of this large Mexican influence, there really isn't too much diversity when it comes to cuisine in Arizona. Con number 4, public transportation and traffic. If you want to retire to Arizona, you have to keep in mind that Arizona has one of the lowest population densities in all of the US. And essentially all that means is that things are very, very spread out in Arizona. This is great if you are someone who's looking for a lot of land that you want to live out on, but it can be a pain if you're someone who doesn't have a means of getting around. The availability of public transportation in Arizona is not just limited, it's almost inexistent when you're in the rural areas of the state. So you most definitely will need to invest in a vehicle if you're going to be retiring to Arizona. And since you'll be driving, there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind and you want to be aware of as it relates to traffic. For one, during the winter months in Arizona, you are likely to see the population of your community almost double. And this is because the winter time is when snowbirds like to escape the snow from their primary residence and flock to Arizona for its warm weather. This increase in population is definitely, without a doubt, going to lead to an increase in traffic because you'll definitely be seeing more cars on the road. Now, the second thing you want to keep in mind is that some areas of Arizona are always undergoing some form of construction. And this is because land is really, really cheap in Arizona. Land is so cheap, in fact, that there are some companies like Google or Uber or Apple that are expanding their operations in the state of Arizona. While the traffic that's caused by this extra construction or the noise that's caused by this extra construction can be a bit of a nuisance in your golden years as you're just trying to enjoy your retirement, just keep in mind that the presence of these companies is actually helping to improve and strengthen the overall economy in the state of Arizona. Con number 5, no ocean beaches. One of the top things that most retirees look forward to in retirement is being able to lay on a beach with a great book and having a view of a never-ending ocean. Unfortunately, that's not something you can do in Arizona. While the state is not completely void of beaches, it does allow you access to beaches and beachfront areas that border lakes and rivers or smaller bodies of water. But it's nothing or it's no comparison to the oceanfront beaches that you'll see in a state like Florida, for instance. So if you're looking for access to the ocean and you would like to take long walks on the beach, you cannot do that in the state of Arizona. On number 6, valley fever. What is valley fever? I'll explain. Valley fever is a fungal infection caused by organisms typically found in soil. So once these fungi get into the air and someone breathes them in, once they get into your lungs, you're thought of as being infected and you're thought of as having valley fever. So there are 2 main types of valley fever. There is the mild version, which does not require any doctor intervention and whose symptoms tend to just kind of go away over time. And then there's the version that does require doctor intervention. So let's go over the symptoms of both. I'm gonna read this because this is a bit of a long list. So symptoms of the mild version of valley fever include fever, cough, headaches, tiredness or fatigue, shortness of breath, chills, night sweats, as well as a red rash, which tends to appear on your chest or your leg area. And symptoms of the more severe version of valley fever includes weight loss and coughing blood, in addition to any of the symptoms that you experienced for the mild version of valley fever. But like I mentioned, if you have the severe version, if you have a more severe case and you're experiencing severe symptoms, you really should go and see a doctor. So the Arizona Health Department has put together a nice dashboard which gives you a lay of the land to get an understanding of which counties in Arizona have experienced the most number of cases of valley fever. Given that this is something that's in the soil, you want to just be aware and be vigilant when you are going to visit these counties that have a higher propensity of getting valley fever. And so by looking at the map, you can see that southern Arizona has a higher likelihood, or if you live in southern Arizona, you would have a higher likelihood of getting valley fever than if you lived in northern Arizona. And so these cases, the most number of cases that Arizona experienced were in Pinal County as well as Maricopa County. And one question that you might also be interested in knowing the answer to is which age group is most affected by valley fever? The answer is seniors. So the Department of Health in Arizona also put together this chart, and it shows that seniors have a higher likelihood of being infected with valley fever. This is most likely due to their jeopardized immune system as they're getting older. When your immune system is compromised, it makes it easier for you to be infected with viruses and things of that sort. But you can see in this map that seniors do have a higher likelihood of getting valley fever than any other age group in the state of Arizona. If you're someone who is interested in retiring to the state of Arizona and you would love more resources and more information about the state, feel free to click on the link below, enter your information, and I would be happy to assist you with your move. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one.